This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London. All of our podcasts are available from our website, www.sas.ac.uk.
We have 10 minutes left before I'll have to bring the day to a close. And maybe there are comments that people would like to make in response to both the papers and the response to the papers.
No, question for Chrissy. I met a father of a disabled child recently, and he said that before the child was in a normal school and felt very bad, and the child wasn't happy. It was, and then they moved into a special needs school where the child was, he's no longer a child, it's now and it was the best choice, the decision they'd ever made. They felt that the child was a lot happier. I wonder what your perspective on that was.
I could go on forever about this particular issue, but I won't. But basically, my perspective is shifting, and I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, in the sense yet, if you like. But in my PhD and the subsequent publications that came out, within the couple of years or so of that, it was very much along the lines of, we're in this rhetoric of inclusion, it's not working, and this is what the mothers are telling me, that is a problem. So special educational needs schools are the way forward, if you like. I don't deny that now, from the position that I'm in now, but I'm questioning if we remain in a position of having separate places for people to be educated, and I'm not just talking about special education, I'm talking gifted and talented, special academies, whatever. Yeah, if we end up being so disparate in our understanding of pedagogy, education, learning, and such like, are we ever going to be able to understand what it's like to be really in an inclusive environment? And so, from a mother's point of view, my daughter had mainstream special needs, home tuition, and travelling. And the best thing for her was probably the special education needs school. But philosophically, I'm struggling with that in terms of thinking about a broader project about inclusion.
In a way, I mean, there is a tension between that, but it doesn't need to be. In as far as it may well be for the individual child the best choice right now, but that's because of the current structures.
Yes,
but it doesn't actually mean that that is the best way forward. And I think actually you were very generous, Chrissy, to the kind of political leaders, because you're saying politically we don't know how to care. I don't think care is salient enough to be on the political agenda. End of story. And I think it's actually going to get worse in the context of austerity, because it's even less important. And actually that's where mothering becomes even more important in a way, because it is the family that is going to fulfill that function, increasingly so, and is going to have to capture the failures of the state or the retrenchment of the welfare state. So I think you were very, very generous.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just, we're not just talking about young people and children with special needs here, we're talking about a lot of other excluded and marginalised groups, yeah.
It's about visibility.
Yes, I am probably over generous, but I guess my over generosity lies in the fact that I probably don't know quite enough about actual day-to-day policies.
I think we'll be able to do. So
But I know,
I haven't looked at the issue of disability, but in terms of equality of opportunities, it has been completely shifted out.
Well, care is not sexy, and it's still seen as very gendered, and it doesn't do the same thing as social justice and human rights narratives. And so care is seen as this thing that, whereas actually, to start talking about social justice and human rights, whereas I think social justice and care, because human rights has it's problematic.
So can we say maybe that caring is a kind of extreme and extended mothering if it's gendered?
I'm not saying it's gendered in the sense that obviously men and women care. We're culturally, from my perspective, from my research, it is gendered. Currently, that's not to say that men don't do some of this work. Sorry, what was the question?
Whether caring is a kind of ultra mothering or
I don't want to start talking about super mothers.
No. Also, because if a child has a disability that sort of makes them a child forever.
Well, I talk about in my work professional parents in inverted commas because these mothers end up being actually untrained, unqualified. They end up doing nursing work, care work, teacher work, So they do end up being in that sort of...
So I thought that's something in a way that you were making. That because care, we think of care as private and domestic and feminized, it's easier for it to slide down the ladder of kind of shared collective values and to defund it and create a austerity.
And that comes out strongly in this novel, as a matter of fact, because one of the problems in the marriage is that because there isn't really state support for the care of the child, the father has greater earning capacity because he's an architect, and so he's earning a lot of money, therefore he's not involved in the caring because he's out all the time, hence she's stuck at home because even though blame could be implicitly attached to him for kind of washing his hands of the problem and also blaming her for not looking clean and shiny when they go out to a posh dinner and all that sort of thing. On the other hand, they haven't got a great deal of choice in the lack of state support that's there. He is also under pressure to be bringing in a lot of money to pay for the medical care.
That's something
The money that's come into it as well, money and cultural capital, to use that term. Social capital, cultural capital comes into it, and buying assessments, which is a very cynical thing to say, but it does happen. Buying labels can help, say, tap into certain special education needs services, and that whole money. And some of the parents, like in your works, some of the parents in the novels, some of the parents, some of the mothers who would have been career active end up stepping back because they don't, because the service isn't there. Or I don't want to take away from the fact that actually some of them do choose to do that, in the sense that rather than give their child to someone else whilst they go out and do their career. But it's the choices in inverted commas as well.
Choices also, and lack of support, which is something that arose from both papers. Lack of support, or a perceived lack of support, and the isolation and self-blame of a lot of the mother characters, and then the way that the other mothers stigmatise the mother of the child who's disturbed their children in a protective way,
but we can see how we can see how it does play out and does come to fruition, in the sense that when you talk to, for example, a bunch of students, sociology students, and you say, if you had a child and there was a child in your class, in your child's class, disturbing everyone, how would you feel? I mean, there are not many people say, oh, I'd be all right about that. And it's a really tricky one, which is why I feel then I have to go beyond that in order to sort of come back to making sense of it morally.
And they're sociology students. So they're more likely to actually engage.
I mean, I'm provoking them.
No, but I'm thinking in terms of the kind of individuals who would choose to actually sign up for a sociology degree. They're more likely to actually accept, to be accepting of difference and diversity.
It's slightly different when they get to their final year. I've been entrenched a little.
Victoria has a comment and Valerie as well, and then I think we probably ought to draw it to a close. So
I just wanted to really quickly, just to kind of, in the interest of drawing the day together a bit, just say that this is reminding me of some of the conversations we were having this morning around Katerina's paper, which was looking at the difference that legislation makes and how, so there seems to be, in the morning we seem to be suggesting that perhaps legislation, discussing the extent to which legislation can prompt social and cultural change, or the what's that relationship? And then here, so Sarah kind of suggests, she says there's been a welcome shift in focus onto positive experiences, and blah, blah, blah. The problem has shifted from being one located within the disabled child to one caused by the lack of appropriate support and services. So she's saying here, in a way, positive kind of workable models already exist, but there's not the institutional support. So that suggests there's a kind of lag in legislation support. Whereas almost this morning it seemed to be, in a way, the other way around. The legislation can prompt the change. So I think that's quite interesting. That seems to be a theme today.
We're talking about fathers sharing, looking after babies and cooking meals and knowing what's in the fridge. I think we can see that another side of that is fathers also taking responsibility for how they turn out to an equal degree, and mothers not feeling like it's entirely up to them to turn their children into the best perfect model child.
My question is kind of the other side of the coin, if you like, when you talk about the exclusion and the excluders, and I'm struck again by something we talked about this morning, which was this idea of non-standard mothering or non-standard mothers being almost, we take all these ambivalent feelings we have about motherhood and call that non-standard mothering. And I think that a lot of the emotions that were brought out in that situation with the mothers not wanting this child to be part of it, or the mothers talking, also the mothers of disabled children talking about the ambivalent feelings towards their own children, the love and hate at the same time. I think those are feelings that a lot of mothers could probably relate to and are not really ready to confront. And I wonder if a lot of this pushing out is not wishing to condone at all the behaviour or the actions, but I wonder if there has been much research into these processes of exclusion, and if perhaps there might be some way of combating that as a way of bringing the disabled child and the disabled child's family back into the overall social pattern.
What we've got to the point at the moment is that I fear, I mean, I'm quite happy personally, but my research is is that the fear at the moment we're in UK and a lot of America and Australia particularly, in a testing and examination culture. We're also in inclusive education culture in terms of like politics. These two things are in conflict with each other, because if you're including everyone but you're also testing from a young age, that does tend to conflict with how we actually make it work. So we've got that thing going on. We've got consumerism around mothers and their children, and it's seen throughout the playground and at parties. I mean, I've got friends who've got young children, 4, 5, 6 year old, and the sort of one-upmanship that goes on around, and like, what's your child doing, and whether they can, I don't know, do fractions or something at some ridiculous age. So at the moment, I think we're still in that. We're still. I say still because I'm hoping there will be a change and reform. But we're still in the position whereby the actual academic excellence that is spouted off politically, and I'm not denying that you would want to get the best out of your academic career, but the fact that it's privileged over other forms of knowing feeds into the buying in, if you like, of my child doing well, my child looking its best, and sort of all that in the playground and other areas. So I'm a bit at the moment pessimistic, but we've gone a long way so far in terms of locking people away. You know, we have come somewhere. But so in that sense, it's not just about the education, it's also about the sort of the culture that we live in terms of like how we perceive education and academic credibility. Mm-hmm. And that's what parents are also buying into.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. As always, we end the day with perhaps more questions than we had to start with. But I think you'll all agree it's been a fantastically rich discussion, several discussions that we've been having today. And please do continue asking questions, making comments on via the network blog or Facebook or Twitter. We can carry on the dialogue, the discussion that way. And thank you to everyone who's contributed today, to whether it was a small comment or a proper full-blown paper, or even smiling in agreement or shaking your head. I found it really thoroughly enjoyable, although we're dealing with difficult issues in some cases. And I've again made a reading list of books that I need to catch up with other people and read. So I think I'll draw the day to a close by saying that the next session will be our author reading event. We have a French author and an Italian author who are going to read from their works, and that event will start at 5 o'clock in